Hello, my dear friends. Imagine holding a piece of the earth in your hand, a stone so rich with colour it stains your fingers a deep, blood red. It's a powder so fine it feels like velvet, a pigment that seems to hum with the energy of the ancient ground from which it came. You're standing under a sky so vast it feels infinite, and the red dust you're holding isn't just a colour, it's a story, a map, a law. And if you were left here with only this knowledge, you probably wouldn't survive the first sunset, because you see a pretty rock, not the language of the land itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a world of difference for a small channel like this one. Now, picture yourself in that vast, quiet landscape. Feel the dry air on your skin. The sun is warm, but a gentle breeze whispers through the sparse, grey-green leaves of the gum trees. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our entire story tonight spirals around that single, simple substance, ochre. When you hear that word, your mind likely conjures a specific image. You see the beautiful, intricate dot paintings hanging in a pristine, white-walled gallery. You imagine a wise, serene Aboriginal elder cross-legged by a crackling fire, his face etched with the wisdom of millennia, dipping a fine twig into a small bowl of perfect, vibrant paint. The art seems to flow from him effortlessly, a direct channel to the spiritual realm, the dreaming. It feels pure, mystical, almost otherworldly. The ochre itself seems like a magical dust, a gift from the earth, ready to use, containing all the secrets of creation in its very particles. This is the glamorous illusionate, as a quiet, clean, contemplative act. But now, let's pull back the curtain on that comfortable fantasy. Let's feel the truth of it. You need paint. You need ochre. You don't simply wander over to the local art supply store. You don't even find it lying conveniently on the ground. You have to go and get it. And this journey is the first, and perhaps most important, part of the art itself. Feel the rough, sun-baked ground under your bare feet as you walk. It's not a short stroll. It can be a journey of many days into territory that is not always friendly. You follow a path etched into the memory of your people for thousands of years. You are heading to a specific place, a quarry. This isn't just any patch of colour or dirt. The ochre from 10 miles east might be a beautiful shade of yellow, but it's the wrong yellow. It has no power. It tells the wrong story. Your ochre, the one your clan has the right to, comes from this specific pit, this cliff face, this sacred hole in the ground. Think of it less like a generic brand of paint and more like a fiercely protected patent. The value is entirely in the source. When you finally arrive, there's no serene artist's retreat. It's a work site. The air is thick with dust. The glamorous illusion of a magical powder shatters against the reality of a rock seam. The ochre isn't a fine dust. It's rock. Hard, heavy, unforgiving stone that must be broken from the earth. You don't have steel picks or dynamite. You have other rocks. You have wooden wedges and sheer muscle. Imagine the jarring shock travelling up your arm as you strike a harder stone against the ochre seam, again and again. The sound isn't a mystical hum. It's the sharp, grating crack of rock on rock. It's hard. Physical labour. Sweat stings your eyes, and the fine, gritty dust coats your throat, your skin, everything. It's less Bob Ross and more dirty jobs. This is the shocking reality. The creation of this sacred substance is an act of industrial effort, not delicate inspiration. You pray heavy chunks of the precious colour from the earth and load them into a basket or a kangaroo skin bag. It's heavy. You have to carry these kilos of raw material all the way back to your camp. There is nothing clean or pristine about this process. It is a messy, exhausting, and sometimes dangerous business of quarrying. So why? Why this incredible effort for what is, essentially, just coloured clay, a mixture of iron oxide and dirt? The historical logic is the absolute core of the Aboriginal worldview. The earth is not just a resource, it is a living, breathing entity, a direct manifestation of the ancestor spirits who shaped it during the dreaming. That specific quarry you just toiled in is not just a quarry, it is the site where an ancestor being rested, or bled, or transformed. The red ochre might be the dried blood of a great kangaroo spirit. The white clay might be the bones of the rainbow serpent. The material is not just like the sacred story. It is the sacred story. Therefore, the act of journeying to the site, of working to release the ochre from the earth, is not a chore. It is a ritual. It is a way of physically connecting with the dreaming, of reenacting the creation event. The sweat, the dust, the exhaustion, they are all part of the ceremony. They are offerings. They imbue the ochre with your own life force, mixing your human story with the divine one held within the rock. The effort is the magic. It's the essential ingredient that transforms mere dirt into a substance of immense spiritual power. Back at the camp, the work continues. You take a flat, hard stone and one of the rough ochre chunks, and you begin to grind for hours. The sound is a constant, rhythmic, grating scrape. Scrap, scrap, scrap. Your shoulders ache. Your hands are raw. The rock slowly, grudgingly, gives way to a pile of fine, brilliantly colored powder. It's a hypnotic process, a form of meditation through labor. You are not just making paint, you are releasing the spirit from the stone. You have worked for this. You've traveled and toiled for it. This sacred powder, this literal piece of your country, now sits before you, glowing in the firelight, but it's still just a powder. It's not yet paint. And more importantly, where does it belong? We think of cave walls and sheets of bark, of permanent galleries under the sun, but its first and most vital home was something far more temporary and far more intimate. It was a canvas that could breathe and feel and dance. That precious powder sits before you, the result of your journey and your labor. This pile of vibrant red dust is your connection to the country, to the dreaming. And now, the moment of creation arrives. Where does it go? Your mind, conditioned by documentaries and glossy coffee table books, immediately goes to stone. You see vast rock shelters, their sandstone walls covered in layers upon layers of figures, ancient hunters, elegant mimispirits, powerful creator beings. You imagine a permanent gallery, a library of sacred knowledge etched in stone for all time. This is the great illusion of Aboriginal art, that its primary form is the timeless, monumental rock painting. We see these sites as the pinnacle of the culture, outdoor museums preserving a static history. We think of art as something made to last, to be admired by future generations. But let's step away from that cool, silent rock face and feel a different truth. The most important canvas was rarely stone. The most sacred and powerful art was almost never meant to last beyond a single ceremony. The primary canvas is you. Your own skin. Feel the shift. You are not the painter. You are the one being painted. You sit on the ground, still and patient. As another person, someone who has the authority, the inherited right to this specific pattern begins to work. They don't just slop the ochre on. They take that precious, ground powder and prepare it. First, they take a mouthful of water, and with a soft, controlled spray, they moisten a small area of the grinding stone, mixing a thick, rich paste. The sound is a gentle sesh of misted water, a soft scraping as the paste is formed. Then, the first touch. It's a shock of cool, wet clay on your warm skin. A line is drawn across your chest. It's not a tentative sketch. It is a confident, deliberate stroke that has been drawn the same way for thousands of years. It is not an act of aesthetic choice. It is an act of law. This line, this circle, this pattern of dots, it belongs to your family, your skin group, your totem. It is your identity, made visible. To paint the wrong design would be a profound transgression, like forging a legal document or stealing someone's name. Imagine the feeling of being slowly transformed. Your ordinary, everyday body is being turned into a living vessel of the dreaming. The artist, perhaps a brother or an uncle, works with intense concentration, their face close to yours. You can hear their soft breathing, maybe a quiet, rhythmic chant that goes with the pattern. The air is filled with the earthy, metallic scent of the wet ochre. Your skin tingles where the paint is applied. As it dries, you feel it tighten, a thin, pleasant crust of sacred earth. You are no longer just you. You are becoming the story. This is the shocking reality. The art that mattered most was ephemeral. It was created for a specific dance, a specific initiation, a specific funeral. It lived and breathed and danced in the firelight for a few hours, charged with immense spiritual power. And there, It was gone. It was washed off in a creek, or smudged away by the sweat of the dance, or simply wore off in the days that followed. Its purpose was not to be preserved, its purpose was to be performed. The power was in the doing, not in the having. Why would a culture invest so much effort the dangerous journey, the back-breaking quarrying, the laborious grinding into something that would just disappear? This is where our modern, Western idea of art as a commodity, an object to be owned and displayed, completely fails us. The historical logic here is about transformation, not preservation. The painting is not a picture of a sacred being for the duration of the ceremony. It makes you that sacred being. You are wearing the dreaming. The design on your chest isn't a symbol of the kangaroo ancestor. It allows the spirit of that ancestor to enter you, to guide your feet as you dance its story. The permanence of the art would be a problem. It would be like wearing a wedding dress or a graduation gown every day for the rest of your life. The sacred state is powerful, but it's not the state of everyday living. The fading of the paint is a gentle transition back to the profane, the ordinary. The art's impermanence is what makes it so potent. It is an event, not an object. Think of those permanent rock galleries now. They are not museums in our sense. They are often places of great power, yes, but many are more like a public record, a statement of ownership, or even a sort of spiritual battery, recharging the land. The living, breathing, dancing art on human skin was the ceremony itself. One is a library, the other is the play being performed on stage. Which one holds more life? So, you stand up, your body, now a map of your lineage, a vessel of ancestral power. The firelight flickers across the intricate patterns of red and white and yellow that cover your torso and face. You feel the eyes of your community on you, not seeing just a person, but seeing the story you now embody. You are ready to dance. You are ready to fulfill the purpose of the paint. But who was that person who painted you? That person with the steady hand and the ancient knowledge. We would call them an artist, a creative genius. But that, too, is an illusion, a misunderstanding of a role that was less about personal expression and more about a profound and heavy duty. You are now a living canvas, decorated with the sacred designs of your ancestors. The firelight makes the ochre patterns pulse and shimmer, and you feel a power that is not your own coursing through you. The person who painted you, the one who transformed you from a simple human into a living vessel of the dreaming, now steps back. In our world, we would give this person a name, the artist. We would see them as an individual of immense talent, a creative force, a visionary. We imagine them praised for their unique style, their innovative techniques, their personal interpretation of the ancient stories. This is the glamorous illusion of the lone artistic genius, the celebrated creator whose name we would write on a gallery plaque. Kangaroo Dance, by artist's name, circa 1850. But let's shatter that comfortable, Western-centric idea. Let's look closer at the person who painted you. They are not an artist in the way we understand it. They are something far more complex, and in many ways, far more important. As you stand there, resplendent in your ceremonial paint, you might notice something. The person who painted you looks ordinary. They are not treated with any special reverence outside of this specific ceremonial context. They don't have a special studio or a life of creative leisure. Tomorrow, they will be hunting, or gathering, or looking after their children, just like everyone else. Their role as a painter is just one facet of their identity, a responsibility they carry, not a career they have chosen. This is the shocking reality. There was often no singular artist. The concept of art as a form of personal self-expression was largely meaningless. The person who painted the design was not expressing their feelings or their vision. They were acting as a conduit, a custodian. Their job was not to innovate, but to replicate. Precision and adherence to tradition were the measures of skill, not originality. To change a line, to add a dot that wasn't there before, would be to tell a lie. It would be like a court scribe deciding to jazz up a legal transcript with a few extra adjectives. It would invalidate the entire proceeding. The right to paint a specific design was not earned through talent, it was inherited. You had to be born into the correct lineage. Your father or your grandfather or your uncle would have held that right before you. They would have taught you the story, the song, and the precise sequence of lines and dots that make up the design. It was a sacred trust passed down through generations. Your hands were simply the latest in a long chain of hands that had traced these exact same patterns. You are less a painter and more a living tradition. a human library responsible for a single, precious volume. So why this rigid, sister? Why suppress the individual creativity we value so highly? The historical logic is tied directly to the function of the art. If the art is a legal document, a map, a charter of identity, and a spiritual connection, then it must be stable. Its power comes from its unchanging continuity, its direct link back to the dreaming. The moment it becomes about an individual's creative flair, it loses its authority. It stops being the word of the ancestors and becomes just one person's opinion. Think of it this way. You wouldn't want the person printing your money to get creative and start adding their own doodles to the $20 bill. You wouldn't want the cartographer mapping a treacherous coastline to add a few imaginary islands, because they look nice. The integrity of the information is paramount. Aboriginal art, in its traditional context, was information of the highest, most sacred order. It was law, history, and theology all rolled into one. The role of the artist was to be a faithful guardian of that information. This communal, inherited approach to art extended beyond a single painter. Often, the creation of a major piece, like a large ground design or a significant rock art panel, was a group effort. One person might have the right to draw the main outline of the Goanna ancestor. Another might have the right to fill in the body with cross-hatching. A third might be the only one permitted to paint the sacred tracks leading away from it. Each person was a specialist, holding one piece of the larger puzzle. The final artwork was not the vision of a single mind, but the carefully assembled, legally sanctioned product of a community. The idea of a lone genius, tormented and brilliant, creating a masterpiece in isolation would have seemed bizarre, even dangerously egotistical. So the person who painted you is not expecting a round of applause for their beautiful brushwork. Their reward is the successful completion of the ritual, the knowledge that they have fulfilled their obligation to their ancestors and their community. They have ensured the continuation of the law. As you prepare to join the dance, you see them not as a special artist, but as your kin, a vital part of the web of relationships that holds your world together. You are the canvas, they are the scribe, and the paint is the ink. And that ink, that sacred ochre, is drawn from a palette that seems incredibly simple, yet holds the entire universe within its grasp. You are ready. The designs on your skin are dry and taut, the firelight casting them in a flickering, living glow. The person who painted you, that custodian of tradition, has fulfilled their duty. Now, your focus narrows to the colors themselves. From our modern perspective, saturated with an infinite digital spectrum and tubes of paint in every conceivable hue, the traditional Aboriginal palette seems incredibly limited. Red, yellow, white, and black. That's it. 4 colors. The glamorous illusion is that this is a primitive or simplistic choice, a result of limited resources. We might see it as charmingly rustic, the artistic equivalent of working with only a few basic building blocks. We might even feel a little sorry for the lack of variety, for the absence of blues, greens, and purples. But that perception of lack is a profound misunderstanding. Let's look closer at those 4 colors, not as mere pigments, but as fundamental elements of reality. You don't see 4 simple colors. You see the entire cosmos. The shocking reality is that this limited palette wasn't a limitation at all. It was a complete and perfect system. Each color wasn't just a color, it was a concept, a symbol, a whole category of existence. To ask for a green or a blue would be like asking for a 5th cardinal direction. It would be nonsensical. The 4 colors were all that was needed because they encompassed everything. Let's feel the weight of their meaning. Red, the color you see gleaming on your own chest, is not just red. It is the color of blood, of life, of energy, of fire. It is the sacred ochre that is literally the lifeblood of the kangaroo ancestor. It represents strength, power, and the land itself, the deep red earth of the central deserts. It is the color of passion, of danger, of war, and of sacred ceremony. When you wear red, you are cloaked in the active, vital principle of existence. Yellow, shimmering on your shoulders, is not just yellow. It is the sun, the giver of warmth and life. It can represent water, or the sand of a riverbank. It is the color of certain clan groups, a marker of identity. It can be a female principle, a counterpoint to the male energy of the red. It is the color of ripe fruit, of certain flowers, of the evening light. When you see yellow in a design, you are seeing the sun, the land, and the law all at once. White, in delicate dots around your eyes. is not just white. It is bone. It is spirit. It is the realm of the ancestors, the water from a sacred spring, the white clay that is the residue of the rainbow serpent. It is the color of morning, of the ethereal, of the sky and the clouds. It is a connection to the world beyond the physical, the ghostly and the divine. To be painted with white is to be touched by the spirits, to carry a piece of the dreaming world on your skin. It is the color that outlines the world, that gives form to the formless. And black, made from charcoal, is not just black. It is the night sky, the darkness of a cave, the shadow of a person. It can represent the earth, the people themselves, or a storm cloud full of rain. It is a color of protection, sometimes used in sorcery, but also used to absorb and nullify negative energies. It is the opposite of the white, the physical to its spiritual, the night to its day. It is the color that holds the others, the background against which the stories are told. So why this specific quartet? The historical logic is profoundly deep. These four colors are not just pigments found in the ground, they are the fundamental building blocks of the visible world as perceived by the people who lived there. The blue of the sky, or the green of a leaf after rain, were not absent. They were simply not considered primary cosmological categories. The world was understood through the lens of blood and sun and spirit and shadow. The colors were a philosophical system, a way of ordering and understanding everything in existence. Every plant, every animal, every person, every story could be classified and understood through its relationship to these four primary elements. The palette wasn't a choice, it was a given, a fundamental truth of the universe, like gravity. When you look at a traditional painting now, you can start to see beyond the beautiful patterns. You're not just seeing an abstract design. You're seeing a theological text, a cosmological diagram. The interplay of red, yellow, white and black is a dynamic story of life, the sun, spirit, and shadow. It is a complete worldview, rendered in just four colors. The lack of green is not a missing piece. Its absence tells you that the story isn't about temporary, seasonal foliage. It's about the permanent, eternal truths of the land and the spirit. The perceived simplicity is actually a sign of incredible intellectual and spiritual efficiency. The patterns on your skin, then, are not just decorations. They are a statement of who you are in relation to the entire cosmic order. The placement of the red next to the white is a sentence in a complex legal and spiritual language. And often, these intricate patterns, these cosmological diagrams, served a very practical purpose as well. They were not just telling the story of creation, they were showing you how to find your way home. The dance begins. You move your feet, and the story you embody begins to unfold in the firelight. The four colors on your skin seem to shift and blend with the motion. To an outsider, an observer from another world, the painting you wear is beautiful, abstract, and deeply symbolic. They would admire the geometry, the rhythm of the dots, the powerful contrast of the colors. This is the glamorous illusion that this art is primarily decorative or purely religious, a complex abstraction meant to represent a mythical story. We see swirling circles and meandering lines and think of them as symbols, like a cross or a crescent moon representative of an idea, but not a literal depiction of a thing. But now, let's look again at the patterns covering your body and the larger paintings on rock or bark that echo them. Let's strip away the assumption of abstraction and see them for what they often are. You're not just wearing a story, you're wearing a map. This is the shocking reality that hides in plain sight. Many of what appear to be the most abstract Aboriginal paintings are, in fact, stunningly accurate and functional topographical maps. Those beautiful, concentric circles that we might interpret as a symbol for eternity, or a community gathered around a campfire. They are, in many cases, a precise marking for a specific place, a waterhole, a campsite, a sacred site, a place where a particular type of food can be found. The circles aren't a metaphor for a place, they are the place, represented in a clear, codified and universally understood visual language. Look at the lines connecting those circles. To the uninitiated, they are elegant design elements, creating a pleasing flow and rhythm across the canvas of your skin. But to you, they are paths. They are the tracks of the ancestors as they walked from one waterhole to the next during the dreaming. But more than that, they are the literal paths you would follow to survive. The line might show the route between two rock holes that hold water even in the driest season. A different type of linear, perhaps wavy instead of straight, might indicate a creek bed that is usually dry but will flow after rain. A series of small dots might not be just decoration, but might indicate the location of a patch of edible yams or the tracks of an emu you can hunt. The entire painting is a data-rich document. It's a survival guide, a land title, and a road atlas all in one. The symbols are not arbitrary. A U-shape is not just a U-shape, it's the universal icon for a person sitting down, the mark they leave in the sand. So a U-shape next to a circle and a wavy line tells a clear story. A person is sitting by the water hole at the creek. Add a spear symbol, and he is hunting. The art is a language, as direct and as information-dense as a sentence. So why was it coded in this way? Why not just draw a pictorial map as we would understand it? The historical logic is brilliant. Firstly, this symbolic language is incredibly efficient and adaptable. You can convey vast amounts of information in a small space. Secondly, it operates on multiple levels. To a child, the painting might just be the beautiful story of the lizard ancestor. To an initiated adult, it is that story, but it is also the practical map showing where to find water along the lizard ancestor's path. The sacred and the practical are not separate. They are one and the same. The story gives the map its memory and its meaning, making it impossible to forget. You don't just remember the route, you remember the sacred journey that created it. This system also allows for the elegant concealment of information. A painting made for public display or for sale to an outsider might look like a beautiful and complete work of art, and it is. But it might be the tourist version. The crucial details, the exact location of a truly sacred, hidden waterhole, for example, might be omitted. The deeper, more restricted levels of knowledge are reserved for those who have earned the right to see them. The art functions as a perfect security system, hiding its most vital secrets in plain sight. An outsider sees a pretty pattern, an insider sees a classified document. Think of the paintings you've seen in museums, those canvases from the Western Desert, with their pulsing fields of dots and mesmerizing circles. They are not just dot paintings. They are often aerial view maps of the artist's country. They are showing you the sand hills, the parallel lines, the water sources, the circles, the vegetation, the types of dots, and the ancestral paths that connect them all. The artists are not just painting their country, they are asserting their ownership, their knowledge, and their profound connection to it. It is a political act, a legal declaration painted on canvas. As you dance, you are not just performing a myth, you are reenacting the creation of your homeland. Every step you take is a step along a mapped path. The colors tell you the spiritual nature of the land, and the shapes tell you its physical form. It is an act of memory, of teaching, of survival. The art is not about the land, it is the land. But to make this map, to give it its sacred power, that ochre powder needed to be transformed into a usable paint, and the substance used to bind it together was far from the simple water and gum arabic we might imagine. It was a substance of life itself. The rhythm of the dance, the heat of the fire, the collective energy of the ceremony, it all works together, and the map on your skin is its focal point. You feel the paint, a second skin of sacred earth. We've talked about the ochre itself, that precious powder won from the rock. We imagine the artist mixing it with a little water, maybe some sap from a tree, to create a pure, natural paint. This is the glamorous illusion, a clean, almost vegan process. We picture a paste made of earth, water, and perhaps some fragrant plant resin, something wholesome and pure. The idea of Aboriginal art is often tied to this concept of being at one with nature, using only the gentle gifts of the earth. But nature is not always gentle, and the reality of making durable, meaningful paint is far more visceral, intimate, and, to our modern sensibilities, a little bit shocking. Let's get our hands dirty again. You have your pile of finely ground ochre. Mixing it with water alone creates a thin, runny liquid that will flake off as soon as it dries. It has no staying power. You need a binder, a glue to hold the pigment particles together and make them adhere to the canvas, whether that canvas is your skin, a rock wall, or a piece of bark. And the binders used were not always the clean, plant-based substances we imagine. The shocking reality is that some of the most powerful and effective binders were sourced directly from the body, human and animal. The ochre might be mixed with blood. Not as a rare, shocking ritual, but as a practical and spiritually potent ingredient. An animal just hunted and killed for food, a kangaroo or an emu, would provide not just meat, but its blood, a substance full of life force, perfect for binding the sacred earth. The warmth and protein of the blood created a tough, resilient, and deeply meaningful paint. When you painted the story of the kangaroo ancestor, you could literally use the blood of a kangaroo to do it. And it wasn't just animal blood. Human blood was also used, especially for the most sacred objects and ceremonies. A trickle of blood from an arm, willingly given, would be mixed with the ochre to create a paint of unparalleled personal connection. The artist was not just applying paint, they were mixing their own life essence into the medium. But it doesn't stop there. Another common and highly effective binder was animal fat. The rich fat from a goanna or an emu, rendered down, could be mixed with the pigment to create a greasy, durable paste. Imagine the earthy, metallic scent of the ochre mixing with the pungent, oily aroma of rendered animal fat. It's a primal, powerful combination, a world away from the sterile scent of linseed oil in a European studio. This wasn't a clean process. It was messy, greasy, and smelly. And there were other, equally surprising binders. The yolk of an emu or turtle egg. The sticky, sugary secretions of a honey ant. Even, in some regions, human saliva or other bodily fluids. The guiding principle was simple. Use what works. Use what is available. And most importantly, use what has meaning. So why this turn to the visceral and the gross? The historical logic is, as always, deeply profound. It's not about a lack of other options. It's about a different understanding of what is pure. To us, blood and fat are messy, organic, and potentially unclean. To a traditional Aboriginal worldview, they are substances of immense power and vitality. Blood is life. Fat is stored energy, sustenance. An egg is the promise of new life. These are not gross. They are sacred. By mixing the ochre, the body of the land, with a binder like blood or fat, the life force of a creature, you are creating a substance that is more than just paint. You are creating a living entity. You are fusing the spirit of the land with the spirit of a living being. This is the ultimate act of connection, of blurring the lines between the painter, the paint, the subject, and the land. The medium is not just conveying the message. The medium is a central part of the message. The paint itself becomes a sacrifice, an offering. It gives the final artwork a power that a simple mixture of clay and water could never possess. Think again about the paint on your skin. It's not just a colored crust. It's a compound of earth, life, and spirit. It has a smell, a texture, a vitality all its own. This understanding of the paint as a living substance changes everything. It means the art is not just a representation. It is an active, powerful agent. It can protect, it can heal, it can curse. This power wasn't just confined to the bodies of dancers. When applied to an object, this living paint could transform it from a simple tool into something else entirely, something with the weight of absolute authority. It could turn a piece of wood into a document more binding than any written contract, sealed not with wax, but with blood and earth. The ceremony reaches its peak. The story you dance, the map you wear, the living paint on your skin, it all combines into a single, powerful statement of your place in the world. Now let's shift our focus from the moving, breathing art of the body to a still object. Imagine a man from another clan arrives at your camp. He carries a simple-looking object, perhaps a shield, a spear thrower, or just a smoothed, flattened piece of wood. It is intricately decorated. The lines are precise, the dots are perfectly placed, and the colours, that familiar quartet of red, yellow, white and black, are vibrant. To our eyes, this is a beautiful piece of tribal art. We see a collector's item, a museum piece. We admire the craftsmanship, the aesthetic quality, the exotic design. This is the glamorous illusion that decorated objects like this were primarily artifacts for display, for trade as curiosities, or for use in fighting. We categorize them as craft or ethnographic art, things to be admired for their beauty and otherness. But the man holding this object is not here to show off his pretty handiwork. He is not an art dealer. He is an ambassador, a messenger, a lawyer, and the object in his hand is not a piece of art. It's a legal document. Let's look closer at that decorated shield. The visitor presents it to your elders. They don't comment on its beauty. They read it. They scrutinize the patterns with the same intensity that a lawyer would scrutinize the fine print of a contract. The specific combination of zigzag lines, the arrangement of circles, The particular style of cross-hatching it all has a precise, unalterable meaning. This is the shocking reality. These decorated objects were often not weapons or art pieces in our sense, but fully functioning, legally binding instruments. The shield might be a formal invitation to a ceremony in the neighboring clan's territory. The pattern on it serves as a passport and a letter of intent. It says who is invited, what the ceremony is for, and guarantees safe passage through the lands in between. To arrive with this shield is to arrive with an official, non-negotiable invitation. A different object, perhaps an engraved message stick, could be even more critical. Think of it not as a decorative twig, but as a subpoena, a royal decree, or a diplomatic cable. It might be a declaration of war, a request for a marriage alliance, or a summons to a joint trial to resolve an inter-clan dispute. The symbols carved and painted onto it are the terms of the agreement. Once accepted by the elders, its terms are as binding as any treaty signed and sealed in a European court. There is no ambiguity. The patterns are the law. And what about ownership of the land itself? In a culture without written deeds and property registers, how do you prove you have the right to a particular stretch of country, to its waterholes and hunting grounds? You prove it with a sacred object. This object, often called a churunga or by other regional names, is not just a symbol of the land. It is the land's title deed. It is a stone or a piece of wood, passed down through countless generations, engraved and painted with the story of how the ancestor spirit created that specific piece of country. To possess the object and to know the song and the story that go with it is to hold the legal title. To lose the object is to risk losing the land itself. So why encode law and diplomacy into these objects? Why not just rely on spoken words and memory? The historical logic is, once again, about permanence and authority. The spoken word can be misremembered, misinterpreted, or deliberately changed, but the pattern on the shield cannot. It is a fixed, tangible record. It carries the authority not of the messenger, but of the clan and the ancestors who first established that pattern. The object acts as a witness, an incorruptible third party to any agreement. Furthermore, these objects could travel. A messenger carrying a message stick could traverse hundreds of miles, through the lands of many different language groups. While he might not be able to speak to everyone he met, the message stick could be read. The symbolic language of the patterns was often understood across wide regions, acting as a kind of visual lingua franca. The object authenticated the messenger and his purpose, allowing for complex long-distance communication and diplomacy. These objects were so powerful that they were often kept hidden, wrapped in bark or feathers, and only brought out for the most important occasions. They were not for casual viewing. To even look upon a sacred title deed object without the proper authority was a grave offence. So, the idea of one hanging on a gallery wall for anyone to see would have been unthinkable, a profound violation of its power. It would be like framing a page from the original Declaration of Independence and using it as a placemat. These legally potent objects, these painted contracts and title deeds, were the bedrock of social and political order for millennia, but that order was about to be profoundly shaken. A new audience was arriving, one that could not read the patterns and who saw not a legal document, but a quaint souvenir, and this misunderstanding would change the very purpose of the paint. The world you know, governed by the laws painted on skin and carved into wood, is a complete and self-contained system. The arrival of a neighboring clan with a message stick is a major event, a piece of high-stakes diplomacy. Now, imagine the arrival of a different kind of visitor. They don't carry message sticks. They arrive in giant wooden canoes with white sails like clouds. They have pale skin that burns in the sun, and they are covered in strange, woven fabrics. They are the Europeans. The glamorous illusion of this moment in history is often framed as first contact, a moment of mutual curiosity and cultural exchange. We see romanticized paintings of Captain Cook offering gifts to noble savages, a peaceful meeting of two worlds. The narrative suggests a gentle opening up, where Aboriginal people, fascinated by these newcomers, began to create art for them, sharing their culture through the beautiful objects they made. We imagine a benign marketplace of ideas and artifacts springing up organically. But let's push past that colonial fantasy and feel the raw, bewildering reality of the situation. You don't see an equal exchange. You see an invasion. These newcomers don't understand the law. They walk across your country without presenting a message stick, without asking permission. They build their strange, hard shelters on the banks of a sacred river. They clear the land, disrupting the paths of the ancestors. They do not see the map in the landscape. they see an empty wilderness waiting to be tamed. Your world is being turned upside down, and your legal system, the art that is your law, is utterly invisible to these powerful, disruptive strangers. This is the shocking reality. The art that was once your constitution, your map, and your theology was forced to become something else. It became a product. It became a desperate tool for survival. The first Aboriginal art made for this new audience was not a joyful act of cultural sharing. It was an act of profound cultural negotiation, and often of desperation. You are hungry. The settlers, sheep and cattle have grazed the yams and edible grasses into oblivion. The fences they erect have blocked your access to traditional hunting grounds. Your people are starving, confused, and susceptible to new diseases that sweep through the camps like a bushfire. You have nothing these newcomers want, except perhaps your labor or your women. But you do have your knowledge. You have your skill. You can still make things. So you take a piece of bark, or a parrying shield, or a spear, thrower objects of law and function, and you paint it. But the purpose has changed. You're not painting it now to summon an ancestor for a ceremony. You are painting it to trade for flour, sugar, tobacco, or a metal axe. The most sacred patterns, the ones that are your title deeds, you keep hidden. You would never sell those. But you can paint other stories, less restricted ones. The story of a hunt, a decorative pattern, a simplified version of a public story. You take your beautifully crafted object to the settlement, to the mission, to the pastoral station. The white man, the Gudir, looks at it. He doesn't read the story. He doesn't see the law of the lizard ancestor's journey. He sees a native curio. He might admire the primitive charm or the savage geometry. He gives you a bag of flour for it. The flour will feed your family for a few days. The shield, which took you days to make and holds a fragment of a 1,000-year-old story, now hangs on his wall next to a hunting rifle and a stuffed bird. The transaction is a universe of misunderstanding. So why did this happen? Why did this profound shift in the purpose of art occur? The historical logic is one of catastrophic power imbalance. Aboriginal people were not freely entering a new market. They were trying to survive in a world where their own economic and social systems were being systematically destroyed. Making art for sale was one of the few strategies available. It was a way to engage with the invaders' baffling economy, to get a small share of the resources they had introduced while simultaneously being cut off from traditional ones. This art was a bridge, but it was a bridge built on deeply unequal terms. It was one of the first and most enduring points of contact between the two cultures. For the settlers, these objects were a way of possessing a piece of the disappearing race, a souvenir of the frontier. For the Aboriginal artists, it was a way to keep their families alive. It was an act of economic pragmatism born of devastating social collapse. This new context forced the artists to make choices they had never faced before. What stories are safe to share? What patterns can be shown to the uninitiated? How can we satisfy their desire for a pretty object without giving away the real meaning, the real power? A new kind of art was being born, one that looked traditional, but had a secret, hidden purpose. It had to speak to two audiences at once, the white buyer who saw a decoration, and the Aboriginal community who could still read the deeper message, a message that was now often one of resistance and cultural survival. The transaction is complete. You've traded your painted shield for a bag of flour. The settler hangs it on his wall, proud of his authentic piece of native craftsmanship. He looks at it every day, seeing a collection of lines and dots, a pleasingly symmetrical and primitive design. He might tell his friends that it depicts a turtle or a kangaroo, a simple story for a simple people. This is the glamorous illusion that the art made for the colonial market was a watered-down, simplified version of the real thing, made purely for aesthetic appeal to Western tastes. We assume the meaning was either lost in translation or deliberately removed to make it palatable for sale. But let's lean in closer to that shield hanging on the wall. Let's imagine you, the artist, are looking at it. You don't see a simplified decoration. You see a secret, coded message hidden in plain sight. The settler sees a turtle, and yes, the basic outline might indeed be a turtle. That's the surface story, the one for the tourists. But the specific pattern of cross-hatching you used inside the turtle's shell, that isn't just for decoration. To another initiated person from your clan, that specific pattern is a signature. It identifies the turtle as belonging to a particular dreaming track, a particular stretch of country that is currently being occupied by this very settler's sheep station, the arrangement of dots around the turtle's head. They aren't random. They form a map, showing the location of a sacred freshwater spring that the settler's cattle are now fouling. The wavy lines that the settler thinks are just water are in fact a representation of the rainbow serpent, the most powerful of all creator beings, who is sleeping under that spring and who will be angered by its desecration. This is the shocking reality. The art made for sale was often a form of silent, defiant protest. It was a Trojan horse. On the outside, it was a beautiful, harmless object. On the inside, it was a legal affidavit, a political statement and a record of grievance. The artist was using the colonizer's own living room wall as a billboard to declare their enduring ownership and connection to the very land the colonizer now claimed. They were documenting the crimes being committed, using their ancient, symbolic language, a language the new owner could see every day but never, ever understand. Why go to such lengths to embed these secret messages? The historical logic is a masterful blend of cultural preservation and subtle resistance. Firstly, it was a way of keeping the knowledge alive. In a time of immense cultural disruption, continuing to paint the stories, even in a modified form, was an act of survival. It ensured that the next generation could see the patterns and learn the meanings, even if the context was a settler's home instead of a ceremonial ground. The art became a mobile library, a secret archive smuggled into the heart of the dominant culture. Secondly, it was an assertion of power in a powerless situation. You might not be able to physically remove the settler from your land, but you can paint your title deed and hang it in his own house. It is a profoundly subtle, but deeply satisfying act of defiance. It says, you may think you own this place, but this object, which you paid for, states that it is and always will be mine. The proof of my law is right here in front of your eyes, and you are blind to it. It transformed a symbol of defeat, the need to sell one's culture to survive, into a symbol of enduring spiritual authority. Think of the famous artist William Barrack, who in the late 19th century painted scenes of ceremony and traditional life. To his white patrons in Melbourne, these were fascinating historical records of a bygone era, but to his own people, the Wurundjeri, they were much more. They were political documents. Barrack was meticulously painting the cloaks, the weapons, the dance formations, all the symbols of a living, breathing culture that the government was actively trying to erase. He was using the colonizer's own fascination with Aboriginal art as a tool to record and legitimize his people's existence and their claim to the land. He was an archivist and a political activist disguised as a folk artist. So the next time you see an early piece of Aboriginal tourist art, a carved boomerang or a small bark painting, don't just see it as a curio. Look closer. Imagine the layers of meaning. See the public story meant for the buyer, but try to feel the presence of the hidden one. That simple-looking object might be a map, a genealogy, a protest poster, or a legal claim. It is an object of profound intellectual and political sophistication, masquerading as a simple souvenir. The artist wasn't just selling a piece of wood, they were selling a puzzle box, and they were the only one who held the key. But for the buyer, there was one thing and one thing only that determined the object's worth, a concept utterly alien to the artist's worldview. That shield, with its secret message of defiance, hangs on the settler's wall. He paid for it. Let's say he paid £1 sterling, a significant sum at the time. For him, the transaction is simple. He has exchanged money, a universal symbol of value, for an object. The object, now, has a price. It is worth £1. He can sell it later, perhaps for more. Its value is quantifiable, transferable, and tied to a market. This is the glamorous illusion of value, that it is a single, objective thing, measured in dollars and cents, pounds and shillings. We see an object, we see a price tag, and we understand its worth in those terms. Simple. Slim. Logical. But let's turn back to you, the artist. You watch him hand over the money. You understand that this money can be exchanged for flour and blankets, so it has a practical use. But the idea that the shield itself is now worth £1 is utterly, profoundly baffling. You look at the shield. You don't see £1's worth of art. You see the days it took you to cut the wood from the correct tree and cure it in the smoke of a fire. You feel the hours of patient carving with a sharp piece of stone or shell. You remember the long walk to the ochre pit, the sacred place you have the right to use. You feel the ache in your shoulders from grinding the stone into powder. You smell the pungent, greasy fat you mixed it with to make the paint. You see the story of the turtle ancestor, a story that is part of your very being, passed down to you from the beginning of time. You see the secret message of protest, a silent shout of defiance. How can all of that, the labor, the history, the sacredness, the protest, be equal to a single metal coin or a piece of paper? This is the shocking reality. For the artist, the object had no single, fixed price. Its value was not monetary, it was contextual, spiritual, and relational. The concept of selling a sacred story for a fixed price was as nonsensical as selling a piece of the sky. The transaction was not a sale, it was an exchange of one kind of necessity, flour for another, fulfilling the need to create, to tell the story. The object was priceless in one sense and worthless in another, because its value existed entirely outside the cash nexus. The Western concept of price strips an object of its history. It becomes a commodity, interchangeable with any other object of the same price. But for you, the shield is not a commodity. It is a relationship. It is tied to the tree it came from, the quarry the ochre came from, the animal the binder came from, the ancestor the story came from, and the person who made it. Its value is a web of connections, not a number on a tag. So why was this economic model adopted? The historical logic is one of imposition. The cash economy was not chosen. It was a fundamental tool of the colonial project. To draw Aboriginal people into it was to civilize them, to break down their traditional systems of exchange, which were based on reciprocity, obligation, and kinship, not on abstract profit. By forcing them to trade for money, the entire social fabric was put under strain. Think of the traditional system. If you needed a spear, you would go to your brother-in-law who was a skilled spear maker. He would make you one. You would not pay him. But now, an obligation has been created. In the future, he might need meat, and you, as a good hunter, would be obligated to provide it. This system of mutual obligation, of gifts and debts, built the society. The new system, where you trade a piece of your spirit for a fixed amount of cash, shattered those relationships. It introduced a logic that was completely alien. This clash of value systems continues to this day in the Aboriginal art market. A painter from a remote community might sell a canvas for $10,000 to a gallery in the city. The gallery then sells it to a collector in New York for $100,000. From a Western perspective, this is just good business. But from a traditional perspective, it can be deeply problematic. The artist did not create a $100,000 object. They created a story. The money is a byproduct, a necessary tool for survival in the modern world, but it doesn't define the object's true worth. The true worth lies in its power to connect, to teach, to keep the culture alive. You take the pound coin. It feels heavy and cold in your hand, a stark contrast to the living warmth of the wood and ochre. It is an object with no story, no connection to country. It is a ghost. You use it to get the flour you need, but a fundamental misunderstanding has occurred, a crack in the worldview that can never be fully repaired. You sold them a library, and they thought they bought a pretty rock. And as you walk away, another hidden truth lingers. Your hands made this object, but the process of its creation, from the very first step, relied on the forgotten hands of others. The story of this art, as it's so often told, is a story of men. We see the male hunter, returning with a kangaroo. We see the male elders, deep in discussion around the fire. We see the male artist, patiently painting the shield, or incising the message stick. We see William Barrack, the great male leader and painter. The glamorous illusion is that the world of high stakes, sacred art, the art of law, of maps, of cosmology was an exclusively male domain. Women are often depicted in the background, gathering food, tending to children, their lives seen as separate from the grand, ceremonial and artistic life of the men. They are the audience, the support staff, but not the creators. But let's adjust our focus. Let's look into the shadows of that campfire scene, away from the men's circle. Let's find the quiet, constant, and absolutely essential work being done by the women. You are a woman of the clan. The men are preparing for a ceremony. They need vast quantities of ochre. Who do you think carried it back from the quarry? The journey to the ochre pit was often a communal one. While the men might have done the heavy, dangerous work of breaking the rock from the seam, it was very often the women who hauled the heavy baskets of raw stone back to the camp, sometimes over many days of walking. They were the logistics team, the quartermasters of the entire artistic enterprise. Now, look at the grinding stones. The men have brought the chunks of rock, but who spends the endless, patient hours grinding them into the fine, perfect powder that is the basis of all paint? Again, this was frequently the work of women. Imagine the rhythmic, circular motion of a small, hard stone in a woman's hand, pressing down on the larger stone slab, slowly, painstakingly transforming rock into pigment. The sound of this grinding, the scrape, scrape, scrape we heard earlier, was the constant background music of the camp, and it was often a woman's song. Without this tireless, uncelebrated labour, there would be no paint. This is the shocking reality. The great male artists were utterly dependent on the foundational, and often invisible, labour of women. Women were not just support staff, they were the indispensable infrastructure of the art world. Their contribution wasn't just physical, either. In many regions, women had their own rich traditions of art, their own ceremonies, and their own sacred knowledge. They painted each other's bodies for their own rituals. They carved intricate patterns onto their digging sticks and wove complex stories into dilly bags and baskets. This art wasn't always as durable as the men's rock paintings or shields, so less of it has survived for archaeologists and collectors to find, but it was no less important. Why has this contribution been so consistently overlooked? The historical logic is a double whammy of bias. Firstly, traditional Aboriginal society was, in many areas, strictly segregated by gender. Men's business and women's business were separate and secret. Male ethnographers arriving in the 19th and early 20th centuries were only granted access to the men's world. They simply couldn't see what the women were doing, and often didn't think to ask. Their records, which became the foundation of our historical understanding, presented a profoundly skewed, male-centric view of the culture, because that's all they were allowed to see. Secondly, this traditional separation was then filtered through the lens of Victorian European sexism. The colonial observers came from a society where women's work was devalued and domestic. They saw women gathering food and caring for children and projected their own cultural biases onto the scene, assuming this work was mundane and unspiritual compared to the important ceremonial business of the men. They failed to understand that for Aboriginal people, gathering yams could be just as much a sacred, ritual act as painting a shield. They couldn't see the cosmology woven into a woman's basket. So the story of the male artist, the lone genius we deconstructed earlier, is even more of a fiction. He wasn't just reliant on a tradition passed down by other men, he was reliant on the immediate, physical work of his mother, his wife, his sisters. The art was a product of the entire community, a web of interconnected tasks, many of them performed by women. Think of the paint itself. Remember the binders, the animal fat, the egg yolks. Who rendered the fat? Who found the nest with the emu eggs? The lines between food preparation and art preparation were completely blurred. The work of sustaining the body and the work of sustaining the spirit were one and the same, and much of this work fell to women. The hands that found the ochre, that carried it, that ground it, that prepared the binders, were just as crucial as the hands that finally applied it. To celebrate one without the other is to see only half the painting. And this practical, communal approach to creation extended to the very tools they used, which were not the specialized instruments of a professional artist, but the ingenious inventions of a people who could make anything from nothing. The ochre is ground, the binder is mixed, and the living paint is ready. The artist, that custodian of tradition, supported by the unseen labor of the communities about to begin. In our minds, we furnish them with a set of tools. We imagine them selecting just the right instrument from a pouch. Perhaps a set of fine-tipped brushes made from animal fur, a range of styluses for incising lines, maybe a special palette for mixing colors. This is the glamorous illusion of the artist's toolkit, a collection of specialized, purpose-built instruments honed over generations for the specific task of painting. We project our own image of the professional craftsman, with their cherished and well-maintained tools of the trade. But let's discard that romantic image of a specialized art kit. Let's look at what the artist is actually holding. It's a twig. A simple, frayed twig picked up from the ground. Or maybe a feather. Or perhaps nothing at all. The artist leans into paint a series of fine, parallel lines. He doesn't use a fine-tipped brush. He takes a small bunch of human hair, ties it together with a bit of stringy bark fibre, and dips that into the ochre paste. He draws the makeshift brush across the surface, creating a set of perfectly uniform lines in a single, efficient stroke. The tool was made on the spot, for a single purpose, and will be discarded when it's done. This is the shocking reality. The tools of the Aboriginal artist were almost entirely improvised, multi-purpose and disposable. There was no concept of a professional artist's toolkit. The guiding principle was one of brilliant, pragmatic ingenuity. The tool was whatever was on hand and fit for the purpose. A broad area needed to be filled with colour. The artist might just use their own finger or the palm of their hand. A series of fine dots was required. The tip of a chewed twig would do perfectly. A complex pattern needed to be incised onto a spear thrower. A sharp flake of quartz, or the incisor tooth of a possum, would be the graving tool. And for one of the most iconic forms of Aboriginal art, a hand stencil, the primary tool was the artist's own mouth. Imagine the process. The artist places their hand flat against the rock wall. They take a mouthful of liquid thin white ochre, and with a controlled, powerful spray, they project the pigment around their hand. The sound is a sharp, wet fat, a burst of creative energy. When they lift their hand away, its perfect, ghostly negative remains, a signature left on the stone. The artist is both the creator and the stencil. The tool is a part of their own body. Why this lack of specialized, permanent tools? It wasn't from a lack of skill or knowledge. It was the result of a profoundly different way of life and a different philosophy of objects. The historical logic is rooted in a semi-nomadic existence. When you are frequently moving from one camp to another, you do not burden yourself with a heavy toolbox full of non-essential items. You carry what you absolutely need: a spear for hunting, a digging stick for food. Everything else you learn to make on the spot from the materials the land provides. The land itself is your hardware store. This lifestyle breeds incredible resourcefulness and a deep, intimate knowledge of the properties of every plant, every rock, every animal. You don't need a dedicated paintbrush when you know that the fibrous bark of a certain tree makes a perfect one. This approach also speaks to a different concept of value. We cherish our tools. We see them as an extension of our skill. A carpenter might pass down his chisels to his son. But in this worldview, the value is not in the tool, it is in the knowledge of how to make the tool. The skill is portable, weightless, and infinitely more valuable than any physical object. The land will always provide another twig, another feather, another sharp rock. The knowledge, passed down through generations, is the true inheritance. This philosophy of improvisation meant that the artist was in a constant, creative dialogue with their immediate environment. The texture of a painting might be determined by the type of feather found that morning. The width of a line might be dictated by the size of the twig that happened to be lying by the fire. The art was not just a product of the artist's mind, it was a collaboration with the country, right down to the specific, ephemeral tools used to create it. It's a level of being in the moment, and in the place that is almost impossible for us to comprehend. So, the image of the artist with their special brushes is a fantasy. The reality is far more impressive. A person with such profound knowledge of their environment that they can conjure the perfect tool from the dirt beneath their feet. They could be dropped naked in the bush and still have a full art kit within minutes. And this deep, living connection to the land extends to the places where the art was made, places we now see as silent, empty galleries, but which were and still are anything but. The painting is done. The artist, using their improvised, brilliant tools, has refreshed a figure on a rock wall. Now, let's step back and see this place as a modern tourist might. You walk along a dusty path, following a park ranger to a designated viewing platform. Before you is a massive sandstone rock shelter, a natural gallery of Aboriginal rock art. It's quiet, almost unnervingly so. The air is still and hot. The only sound is the chirping of insects and the distant caw of a crow. The ranger points out figures painted thousands of years ago, their ochre colours faded but still visible. You are told to be quiet, to be respectful. You are in a museum, an archaeological site. This is the glamorous illusion of the rock art site, that it is a silent, static, and ancient relic of the past. It's a place where things happened long ago. We see it as a beautiful, but dead place, a gallery of ghosts. We admire the art as history, as evidence of a lost world, preserved by chance in the dry air. We speak in hushed tones, as one would in a library or a graveyard. But now, let's stay in that place after the tourists and the ranger have gone. Let's feel the sun go down and the stars emerge, impossibly bright in the clear desert sky. Let's erase the illusion of silence and emptiness. You are not in a museum. You are in a church, a powerhouse, a living room, and an embassy, all at once. And it is not silent at all. The air itself is thick with presence. The figures on the wall are not just pictures, they are the beings themselves, currently residing in the stone. That faded red kangaroo is not a painting of the kangaroo ancestor, it is his physical manifestation, his resting place. The Wandjina spirit with its halo-like headdress and mouthless face is not a depiction, it is the spirit itself, watching you. This is the shocking reality. These rock art sites were never considered galleries in our sense. They are active, spiritually potent places, buzzing with the energy of the ancestor spirits who live within the rock. To an Aboriginal person, with the correct cultural knowledge, this place is not quiet, it's humming. It's a place of immense power that needs to be approached with caution and the correct rituals. You don't just wander in. You might announce yourself, letting the spirits know who you are, and that you come with a good heart. You might leave a small green branch as an offering. To treat this place as a simple collection of old paintings would be profoundly dangerous, like treating a nuclear reactor like a garden shed. So why do we perceive it as a silent museum? The historical logic is rooted in our deep-seated separation of the physical and the spiritual. In the Western worldview, a rock is a rock. A painting is a representation. A spirit, if it exists at all, is somewhere else entirely in heaven, in another dimension. We see the world as fundamentally inanimate, a collection of objects. The Aboriginal worldview does not make this distinction. The land is alive. The rock is alive. The spirits of the dreaming did not disappear after they created the world. They went into it. They reside in the land, in the water holes, in the rocks. Therefore, the act of painting and repainting these sites was not just about making art. It was an act of maintenance. It was like feeding the spirits. By refreshing the ochre, you were feeding the essence of the kangaroo ancestor, ensuring he remained strong. His strength, in turn, would ensure the ongoing fertility of all kangaroos in the area, meaning there would be food for your people. The art was a vital part of a system of reciprocal care. You look after the ancestor, and the ancestor will look after you. The gallery was, in fact, the engine room of the entire local ecosystem. The layers upon layers of paint that archaeologists get so excited about are not just a record of changing styles. They are evidence of continuous care. They are thousands of years of offerings, of feeding, of keeping the power switched on. The newest, brightest layer of ochre isn't just fresher, it's more powerful. It's a fresh charge of energy. This perception of the sites as living places continues today. Elders will visit their traditional rock art sites to talk to the ancestors, to ask for guidance, to report on the state of the country and the community. They are not talking to pictures on a wall. They are having a conversation with family. They are consulting a living library and a powerful spiritual board of directors. When we see these places as silent and empty, we are projecting our own spiritual emptiness onto them. We are blind and deaf to the life that is humming just beneath the surface. We see an artifact to be preserved. When they see a relationship to be maintained, we see history. They see now. And the very material that was used to maintain this relationship, the ochre that was the food of the spirits, would soon become the centre of one of the greatest and most overlooked hastes in the country's history. You are standing in that living, breathing rock shelter, a place of immense spiritual power. The very substance that gives it this power, the food of the ancestors, is the ochre. You know the quarry it comes from. You know the long, arduous journey to get there, the work required to wrest it from the earth, the songs and rituals that must be performed. This specific pit of red ochre is not just a resource. It is the spiritual heart of your clan, the dried blood of your creator being. It is the most valuable, most sacred thing you know. Now, imagine a new kind of man arriving. A prospector. He carries a steel pickaxe and a canvas bag. He is not looking for stories or spirits. He is looking for minerals. He sees the vibrant red earth around your sacred quarry not as the blood of an ancestor, but as iron oxide, a potential source of wealth. This is the glamorous illusion of colonial expansion, the heroic pioneer, the rugged individual discovering the hidden wealth of the land. History books celebrate these men as founders of industry, who found the coal, the iron, the gold that would build a new nation. They were pioneers, opening up the wilderness and unlocking its potential. But what did that discovery look like from your perspective? The prospector walks into your sacred quarry. He doesn't announce himself to the spirits. He doesn't know the songs. He sees a rich seam of iron ore, and he stakes a claim. He brings in heavy machinery. He blasts the sacred ground with dynamite. He digs a vast, open-cut mine, tearing the heart out of the country. This is the shocking reality. The great mineral discoveries of colonial Australia were in many cases an act of grand larceny. They were the theft of the most sacred material from the people who had protected and used it for millennia. What was celebrated in the colonial newspapers as the great Northern Iron Deposit discovery was, for the local Aboriginal clan, the desecration and theft of their cathedral, their holy of holies. It was as if someone had dynamited the Vatican to get at the marble, or bulldozed Mecca to mine for silica. The famous Wilgie Red Ochre mine in Western Australia, for example, is one of the oldest continuing mining operations in the world, used by Aboriginal people for tens of thousands of years. The ochre from this specific mine was so valuable that it was traded across vast distances, a sacred and highly sought-after commodity. When Europeans discovered it, they saw a rich iron deposit. They didn't see the complex trade routes, the social laws, the spiritual significance. They just saw a resource to be extracted and sold. So why was this profound act of desecration not seen as such by the colonizers? The historical logic lies in the terra nullius doctrine of legal fiction that Australia was a land belonging to no one before European settlement. If the land is empty, if the people are just wandering nomads with no concept of ownership, then there is nothing to steal. You can't steal from someone who owns nothing. The quarry was not seen as a sacred site or a possession, because the entire concept of Aboriginal ownership and spirituality was denied. It was just a patch of dirt, and the first person to stick a flag in it, according to British law, was the new owner. This was a clash of two fundamentally different understandings of the earth. For the prospector, the land was a dead thing, a container of valuable commodities. Its value was underground, hidden, and could only be realized by digging it up and shipping it away. For you, the land is a living being. Its value is on the surface, in its stories, its sacred sites, its ability to sustain life. The idea of digging it up and shipping it away is an act of mutilation. The consequences were catastrophic. Not only was the source of the sacred paint physically destroyed, but the spiritual and economic systems that revolved around it collapsed. Clans who held the rights to a quarry lost their most valuable asset. The great trade routes, which were arteries of social and cultural connection, withered and died. The artists could no longer get the right paint, the spiritually correct paint. Imagine a Christian church being told it could no longer use wine for communion, only grape-flavored soda. The ritual might look the same, but the essence, the power, would be gone. The artists were forced to use inferior ochres from non-sacred sources or eventually cheap, commercially produced paints from a store. This was not just a change in materials, it was a profound spiritual disconnection. The paint no longer contained the essence of the ancestor. The line connecting the artist, the art, and the dreaming was severed. The Great Ochre East was not just the theft of a mineral. It was the theft of a worldview, a theft of meaning itself. And it led to a final, tragic misunderstanding about the nature of the art, the belief that an artwork could ever truly be finished. The connection is broken. The Great Ochre East has left a void, replacing the living, breathing earth of the ancestors with commercial paint in a can, or with nothing at all. This forces a change, not just in material, but in concept. The new art, the art made on boards and canvas for the Western market, needs to conform to a new logic. It leads to the final, and perhaps most profound, illusion. It's the idea of the finished piece. Imagine a masterpiece in a grand museum. It hangs on the wall, bathed in soft, controlled light. It is encased in a heavy, ornate frame, perhaps protected by a sheet of glass. The canvas is taut, the varnish gleams, and the artist's signature is tucked neatly in the corner. It is a sealed artifact. Its creation is a moment that is definitively over. The artist has declared it finished, and their relationship with it has ended. Now it belongs to history, to the ages. Its value lies in its preservation, its unchanging state. To add another brushstroke would be an act of vandalism. This is the glamorous illusion of the finished work, that art is a destination you arrive at, a product that is completed and then exists in a state of perfect, perpetual stasis. But let's go back one last time to that rock shelter, before the quarry was destroyed. Let's feel the true, deep time rhythm of the art. An elder, the custodian of this place, approaches the wall. He looks at a painting of an emu, its red ochre faded by a century of sun and wind. He does not see a finished work to be preserved. He sees a sleeping spirit that needs to be woken up. He takes his freshly mixed ochre, the living paint of blood or fat and sacred earth, and he begins to paint. He does not paint next to the old emu. He paints directly on top of it. He carefully, respectfully traces the ancient lines, his fresh, vibrant red covering the pale, faded one. He is not replacing the old art. He is feeding it. He is reawakening it. This is the shocking reality. In its truest, most traditional sense, Aboriginal art was never finished. It was a process, not a product. The paint was never truly dry, because the spirit within it was never dormant. An artwork was not a static object to be preserved. It was a living entity that needed to be continually renewed. The concept of a finished piece would have been meaningless. It would be like saying a conversation is finished forever, or that a relationship is complete. The act of repainting was the entire point. It was a dialogue with the ancestors, a reaffirmation of the law, a recharging of the spiritual battery of the land. Each new layer of ochre was a new breath of life, ensuring the story didn't become a relic of the past, but remained a vital force in the present. This applies not just to rock art. Remember the paint on your skin. It was created for a single night, to be washed away, its purpose fulfilled. The immense, intricate ground designs, made with cloud sands and feathers and seeds, were created for a ceremony and then, as part of the ritual, were swept away by the dancers' feet, these patterns returning to the earth. The value was not in the thing itself, but in the knowledge and the ritual act of making it, over and over again. Why this constant cycle of creation and renewal? The historical logic is the absolute opposite of the Western desire to conquer time. Western art often seeks permanence, a way for the artist and their vision to achieve a kind of immortality, to freeze a moment and hold it against the decay of ages. The Aboriginal worldview, however, is cyclical. It flows with time. It doesn't fight it. The seasons cycle. People are born and die and are reborn. The sun rises and sets. The art must reflect this same rhythm. It is a continuous, living tradition, not a collection of historical artifacts. A finished painting would be a dead thing, a channel that has been blocked. The power lies in the verb, the doing, the painting, the renewing, not in the noun, the finished object. The shift to creating works on canvas for the market forced this cyclical tradition into a linear box. The artist now had to learn to finish a painting, to sign their name and let it go, to send it out into the world as a static object. This was perhaps the most difficult conceptual leap of all. And yet, even within this new format, the old worldview persists. Many artists will talk about painting as an act of telling a story, and when the story is told for that day, the painting is done. They will then begin another canvas and tell the story again. The drive is not to create a single, definitive masterpiece, but to remain in the continuous, life-giving process of telling, painting, and being. The ochre you held in your hand at the very beginning of our journey was never just a pigment. It was a seed of story, of lore, of life. Its purpose was not to create a single beautiful flower to be plucked and preserved, but to be planted again and again, to ensure that the garden of culture, the country itself, never ceased to bloom. The story does not end. It simply waits for the touch of a hand, for the whisper of a song, to be renewed and told once more, glowing and alive in the ever-present now. And as the last echoes of that story settle in the quiet air around you, you can feel the journey of the night drawing to its gentle close. The vibrant reds and yellows, the deep, earthy smells, the sounds of chanting and scraping and life all begin to soften, to merge with the comfortable darkness. The intensity of the firelight gives way to the gentle glow of embers, and the sharp focus on the past begins to blur, dissolving into the soft landscape of your own impending dreams. The stories of those artists, their surprisingly simple and profoundly complex lives, have been told for tonight. They are not asking for your attention any longer. They are simply releasing you, letting you drift away on the slow, easy current of sleep. The dust of the red ochre, the memory of that sacred paint, now settles like a fine, warm blanket over your mind, a layer of peace, a layer of stillness. The world of lore and spirit, of maps and memory, now fades into a single, calming sensation of rest. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to see. There is only the gentle, rhythmic pull of your own breath, leading you down into a deep and untroubled slumber, where your own stories can be written in the silent language of dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.